Good afternoon, aloha. Welcome to the Hawaii State Bar Association's Living Legends series. My name is Sherry Broder, and my guests today are Philip Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke. Welcome, everyone. Today, our program is about alternatives to practicing law. I thought before we started in on alternatives, we'd start at the beginning. So I wanted to ask you folks, what was it like back in the late 50s, early 60s, practicing law in Honolulu? So Phil, I'd like to start with you. What was it like when you got back here in the 50s? Because you had to go to the law school on the mainland, of course, since there was no local law school.
Right. Well, I got out of the Navy. I was drafted into the Navy in 1955 because the Navy was short of personnel due to the Korean War. So for 2 months, they said, half of you were in the Army, half of you in the Navy. So I was drafted in the Navy, spent just under 20 months in the Navy, got out, came to Hawaii, came back home, and then took the bar, passed the bar, and was told at that time, this is in 57, 58, that there were not too many opportunities for attorneys of Asian extraction at that time, and that the only real opportunities were in small Asian law firms, or of course the Attorney General's office, or the city and county, the prosecutors, or the corp counsel, as it is now called. So it is really interesting that a good friend of mine who's an attorney, Richard Lowe, was working at Cook Trust Company. And he said, Philip, I'm leaving the company to go join a law firm, and it's really interesting. They have 3 other attorneys there. The head of the company was Judge Stedman, a retired Hawaii Circuit Court judge. And so that's how I started, and I never practiced.
So was Hawaii already a state when you came home?
No. That was 57. 59, I believe, was statehood. Right.
So, Jay, how about you? What year did you come to Hawaii to practice law?
I arrived in the Coast Guard. I joined the Coast Guard because I didn't want to get drafted. And I came out here October 1st, 1965. My boss was a wonderful man, and he took me immediately to Jack Sion's place near the airport. You guys remember that? And he said, you need to see this to understand local culture. And I did, I understood. And then we got to the office and he said,
You better prompt those of us who don't know who Jack Sion is.
It's called the, what was it called?
Well, I don't know, it was a strip club, so they told me.
So they told you, okay. Well, that explains why I have no idea what it was. Okay.
And then he took me to the office, he said, you can't possibly understand how things work in the state. So, until you go to Japan. So I'm giving you orders to go to Japan and become familiarized, which I did.
Well, I guess that was better than being ordered to Vietnam.
It was lots better.
Yeah.
And Japan was, very friendly in those days. It was not too long after the war, actually, and it was a great place to be familiarized. So I went to Japan for a week and learned a lot about Hawaii in the process. I came back and practiced military law. I returned to New York in '68, but I got to tell you a short story about that. I wanted to take the bar, and so I applied.
In Hawaii or the bar in
New
York?
I had already been admitted in New York. I wanted to take the bar, so I filed the application. And in those days, if you remember, you had to demonstrate that you were a resident of the state.
For 1 year?
Yeah, and I'd been here, but I got a call from a fellow named Eddie Suzuki. Remember him? He was the clerk of the Supreme Court. He said, we've seen your papers. We understand that, you have a bank account here, you register your car here, you vote here, but we're not exactly, sure that you're really a resident of the state of Hawaii. And the justices would like you to come down because they would like to sit en banc and ask you about the indicia of your residence in Hawaii. I said, really? That doesn't seem necessary. I have all these indicia already, and you know what else? I am engaged to marry a local girl. He said, did you say local girl? I said, yes, local girl. He said, Mr. Fidell, I'm going to talk to the justices, and I'll call you back in 5 minutes. He calls me back in 5 minutes, and he says, you know, when you told me that you're going to marry a local girl, and I told them, they said, you know, it's not necessary for you to come down and be examined en banc. That will be sufficient. You can take the exam. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I didn't get back here until 71 because I took a graduate degree. And in 71, things were really rolling. You know, we had a wave of investment in that period. Things were very active. And the university was very active. And I remember just 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, we had a speech by a fellow named Oliver Lee. And, you know, he was an activist at UH at the East-West Center, and things were very active. The state was like coming alive, and so was the practice. And it was more aggressive than the Coast Guard had been, actually. We can talk more about that later.
So how about you, Ed? What was it like when you came here to Hawaii?
Well, I arrived here in 1966 and was able to take the bar that year. And the reason that I was able to take the bar that year was the year before, in *65, my family came out here to see my parents. My dad was a retired Navy JAG officer at that stage. And I was coached by a buddy of mine who was a member of the bar that if I was interested in returning and practicing here, that I should file an affidavit to that regard with the Supreme Court, which I did. And so I was a lucky person that when I arrived the next summer, I was able to take the bar right away and pass. So I started practicing here in 1966. Prior to that, I graduated from Bold Hall and your law school, as I recall, in 1963, and then practiced law in Ventura, California for 3 years before making the move.
So did you find the practice in Ventura very different from the practice here in Honolulu?
I did, and I think one of the main reasons it was very different is that in Ventura, even though it's at that time it was a nice small town, and the local bar was a very hospitable place, but most of our opponents, I was doing trial work, and most of our opponents came from Los Angeles, San Diego, all around, and you know, as far as being courteous to a new guy on the street, that kind of thing, forget it. I've often told people since then that if I had remained there practicing, I probably would have done it for about 10 years, and that would have been enough. But I found that Hawaii is a place where people really follow the aloha spirit, and it's a very pleasant place to practice law, especially if you get into sort of a specialized area, where you're dealing with the same opponents or the same supporting cast from time to time. And I've practiced here for 48 and a half years, and have recently retired.
Well, I don't know if you remember, Ed, but you and I had a case together once upon a time. You were representing Queens Hospital. I was representing a plaintiff. But yeah, I think that, you know, you acted with great decorum and like a gentleman all the time, and was made it much more pleasant. And we were actually able to resolve things with very little acrimony. So that might be why you don't remember.
Well, I do sort of remember that we had something
Yeah.
going, but I couldn't tell you about which case it was right now.
Yeah. So Phil, you know, we wanted to talk about alternative paths to the practice of law. So you're the perfect person to start with, since you took an alternative practice right from the beginning. And so what do you think about, you know, going into the financial industry as an opportunity for a lawyer and as a career path for you?
I think that the training that you get and the education that you get going to law school is perfect for the financial industry. You know, bank has the mortgage area, they've got the investment area now, they've got all kinds of different things that you can truly get involved in. And later on, if you want to go into any particular aspect of the financial industry, it's wonderful. Plus, your training provides you with the way in which to communicate, both verbally and in the written language, and how to meet with people, and it is an invaluable education. The only argument I have, and there are several attorneys that I've talked to, is that it takes too long, 3 years. Maybe law school should be only 2 years, and there's a lot of discussion about that, like, you know, getting your MBA. And the opportunities that I had, if we have time, I'd like to relate some of the bookend stories in meeting people during my time at the bank that are really of interest, because it's very different, obviously, from practicing law. You have to meet and deal with people from all, you know, shapes and sizes.
Yeah. Well, of course, that was your entire career, and
you know what's interesting thing about this, Sherry? It just dawned on me that when you go into a non-practice area like banking, you're making what probably, practically speaking, is a permanent choice. What I mean is, you're out of the law firm now. You're out of the private practice. It's hard to get back in. Isn't that true? Once you leave.
But maybe you could, you know, you could go into that part of the practice of law that has to do with the financial industry.
That's true.
I mean, it seems in today's day and age that the younger lawyers do often have another skill, you know, like if they go into patent law, maybe they're engineers or scientists at the same time, or even if they're going into malpractice defense, they might even be doctors. You know, we see that sometimes.
You have to become a doctor.
If you're going to do malpractice defense.
Well, you know, Sherry and Jay, one of the advantages that I thought about when I considered after a couple of years with the trust company is, and we had kids pretty early on, and we had planned to have a large family. And I had seen the attorneys, our friends, working very long hours. And, you know, working for a financial institution, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Bingo, that's it. And that allowed a lot of time for a family life. And that was very, very important to my wife and myself. So that, you know, that was and I'd never practiced, so it's not as if you start in practice and then you go in the finance field and come back again.
Well, in your case, Jay, it looks like you started out a bit in journalism and issues of civic importance, and now, since you've become a distinguished attorney in town and very accomplished, it seems that you've made a change, and you're picking up maybe where you started out at in ThinkTech. Would you agree with that?
What happened to me is interesting. Our firm was largely involved in real estate. And we represented a lot of these buildings downtown. We represented, you know, capital concentrations that were making deals, and we saw a lot of that happening. And I got involved in the Building Owners Association, BOMA, and I got to be their program manager. And I organized luncheon events and educational events and all that, and that sort of took me out of you know, the strictly practicing. And that led to, you know, a whole new approach. Now, I was still practicing and hard, but I was getting the smell of something else. For me, in 2001 was the demarcation. In 2001, the Hemi Maru was sunk by the submarine Greenville off Waikiki. And luckily, I got a call from PBS. They wanted me to cover this on national television. At first, I said no, but then I ultimately agreed to do that.
Why did they call you?
Because I was in the Coast Guard, and I was a Coast Guard investigator and judge, and I knew how these things worked. I knew about casualty at sea. I'd done a lot of investigations, so I was a good choice for them. And I covered this court of inquiry they set up at Pearl Harbor. In the process, I met a lot of people in the press, and it gave me a whole new leg up on things. So one of the groups I met was Hawaii Public Radio, and that led to the start of a radio show that lasted through 2008, and then we got involved in this kind of thing.
Okay,
so
I want to ask you some more questions about that, but right now we're going to take a short break, if you'll forgive me. And I'm Sherry Broder. I'm here talking to Phil Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
The air. Okay. Okay. Aloha. If you have just joined us, I'm Sherry Broder, and our topic today is alternatives to the practice of law. And we have with us distinguished attorneys, Phil Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke. So, Jay, I just wanted to go back to your being assigned the job of investigating and reporting on the Ehumi Maru. You know, how did they know to contact you? I know you said that you were in the Coast Guard and you had done investigations before, but there must be plenty of people who are in the Coast Guard and have done investigations.
One is not necessarily directly related, but I had been involved while I was in the service in the Coast Guard with some very high-level national cases, including the defection of Simos Kadarka off the Sovietskaya Litva near Martha's Vineyard in 1971. And that was a national case, so people knew who I was in this investigation business. Secondly, my brother continued. He was in the Coast Guard also, and he continued in military justice as a career. And so we were part of a group, and so when PBS was looking for somebody out here, you know, they talked to him, and he put them in my direction. And so that was the connection for that.
Well, you are related to Linda Greenhouse, aren't you?
I am related to Linda Greenhouse.
Yeah, so I'm sure she had nothing to do with getting you.
I doubt it.
That.
But my
She's
brother
probably too
had
busy.
something to do with it. He teaches military justice in Yale now, and so this is right up his alley.
I see.
But anyway, that was really an experience. I mean, it was a lucky break because you know, how often do you get to stand in a circle and talk to the country, which is what I was doing over and over again. And that leads to all kinds of, you know, that kind of experience leads to a change in your life. I didn't know at the time, but that's what happened. And gradually it resulted in this.
So Ed, I wanted to ask you about your very interesting case. I don't know if you know, but Ed represented one of the Guantanamo Bay prisoners, and actually I was the chair of the Hawaii State Bar Association Awards Committee, and when I heard about it, because of course Ed didn't tell anybody, you never hear about it or anything, I was so impressed that I nominated him to get the HSBA award for outstanding service. So I'm really happy to be here today and getting a chance to hear from Ed about how did you end up doing something like that from so far away here in Hawaii, and what did you think of that experience? What is your assessment of how the Guantanamo Bay justice experience procedure what's your assessment of how it all worked out?
Well, that covers a lot of territory.
Okay, well, just keep it short.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the award. And well, basically, as a member of the American College of Trial Lawyers, there was a big solicitation of members to volunteer to represent the prisoners down in Guantanamo. And that's how I got involved with it to begin with. I realized that this is the kind of thing that many attorneys, criminal attorneys, do all the time. Except there was a flavor about Guantanamo that was quite intriguing, really. So I did that for a period of 5 years, and I would fly down to meet with my client twice a year, although I think he wanted me to come a lot more often. But that was that's sort of the way it worked.
Who was your client? What was he accused of doing, and where was he from?
Well, I'd like to just refer to him as Omar, and
okay.
he was from Libya, and basically had been in the Pakistan area and so on, training with a group of fellow Libyans whose goal had nothing to do with the United States. They wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. It was the same guy that we eventually helped get rid of years later. And in so doing, he came in contact with the Taliban and also Al-Qaeda, and he was hired by the Taliban to do mind clearance work, including mainly in Afghanistan. And back in 1998, keep in mind this is way before 9/11, as part of his mind clearing, he accidentally blew one of them up and severely injured his right leg, which by the time I met him had resulted in the amputation of his right leg. And he was a very crippled up person. And that's significant because he was accused of all kinds of things by our government when we got around to doing the habeas corpus deal. And he was the kind of person that'd be a real struggle for him today to get into this room. He hobbled around with his prosthesis and used a walker and was really a very impaired individual. But he got swept up in a raid by the Pakistanis on a school where they arrested 30-some people, including children who were 13 years old, 13, 14, and some of the most of these people who were arrested in the Pakistan raid wound up in Guantanamo. And while I was actively defending Mohammed or Omar, these kids were still there. The only difference is they were like 18. And,
yeah.
So to me it was a very ultra interesting experience, and I'm just sorry that we weren't more successful in getting most of the people released. There were a few that got released because of the decision of the habeas judge, and those judges, by the way, were federal district court judges in the D.C.
Were specific judges appointed to the Guantanamo Bay cases, or was it by the wheel in D.C.?
I think that most of the district court judges would take a turn with someone with a habeas claimant.
Yeah. So what do you think about the current efforts of the Obama administration to get these people out of Guantanamo and someplace else?
Well, I definitely applaud him doing that. Of course, he announced when he ran the first time that that's what he wanted to do, and it's been a little bit of a mystery to me as to why it wasn't done a long time ago. But I definitely came to the conclusion, both from my client and talking to fellow attorneys, because we'd have maybe 5, 10 attorneys in Guantanamo at any given time. And I became thoroughly convinced that these were a group of people that truly were in the wrong place at the wrong time, not doing anything at all adverse to the United States. And the bulk of them should have been released years ago. My client, by the way, was arrested and eventually transported to Guantanamo in August of 2002. So, that's a long time ago.
Has he been released yet?
No.
No.
Not to the best of my knowledge,
Yeah.
but I basically ceased being his attorney in the summer of 12.
So what do you think about the recent report that's come out on torture by the CIA of some of these prisoners?
Yes, well, there were two different, eventually, there became two different grades of prisoners in Guantanamo. There were the group that was sent there, every single one of them during the year 1992. And then later...
You mean 2002?
2002.
Yeah.
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 But later, I think the 30-some prisoners who had been in the CIA secret prisons, the guys who were claiming, the waterboarding and that kind of torture. But during the Bush administration, he ordered them out of the CIA prisons and into Guantanamo. So a lot of people, after they arrived, started hearing their stories and what they had done. And one of the guys, Sheikh Mohammed, bragged about being the guy that was the mastermind of 9/11 and sunk a destroyer and all kinds of that happened. He claimed credit, and that I think tainted these nobodies like my client who had been in prison since '02, and anyway, it's sort of kept us there. Yeah, they were going to try this group of what they called high-value detainees post haste, but because of one thing and another that I'm not privy to, I think only one single person has been tried and convicted of that group. So it's a great human interest story. But
why did you cease to represent him?
Well,
does he have other counsel now?
Actually, I defended him as a team, a part of a team, and I had a Washington, D.C. attorney who worked with me. And it got to the point after we lost the habeas motion that when I would fly to Guantanamo at no little time and expense to meet with my client. After that, he refused. And so we ceased our relationship.
Okay, we're going to take a short break now, and I'm Sherry Broder, and we're here talking with Philip Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Hi, we're back on the air, and we have Phil Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke with us, and we're talking about Hawaii's living legends, and today we're addressing some issues relating to alternatives to the practice of law. I was fascinated that you were here during the statehood vote, Phil, and I was just wondering if you could tell us, you know, what it was like. Was there a lot of controversy before the vote? I mean, now we hear about a lot of controversy from Native Hawaiian people, but wondering at that time, was there a lot of controversy, or was it something that people were enthusiastic?
Virtually no controversy. I mean, everyone was, you know, very much in favor. Obviously, we wanted to be the 49th state, but of course the deal was that unless Alaska came, we wouldn't have gotten statehood. At least that was the deal that was supposed. So we became the 50th state. I did not hear it. You're absolutely right. Nowadays, there is great, because of the movement of the Hawaiians and independent nations, what have you, a lot of pilikia in that regard. But getting back to an alternative career, what I wanted to point out, Sherry, to those who are attorneys and choose an alternative career, that doesn't mean that you don't, you know, associate with the law profession. For example, early on, I was president of the Young Lawyers section. My wife was president of the Law Wives at that time, and even to this day, I am very involved with the bar associations at that time, when, you know, when things are really happening in the Young Lawyers section. And even today, I maintain a very close relationship with a lot of attorneys in town, as you well know, with a luncheon that we attended, and which is, again, a very unique thing. I think I might take a minute just to explain to people about the Wednesday Luncheon Club, of which these gentlemen have also been guests of. We started out with 8 attorneys.
But they were all men.
All men, right. We have not had a female member yet, though.
But you've had a female invitee. That's why I was so honored to be here.
Right, exactly. Not too many female members were members of the bar invited. For whatever reason, each individual member there has her own reason as to. But many years ago, we started a Wednesday Luncheon Club. We call it the Wednesday Luncheon Group. And we're now down to 5 members. And it's a very simple rule in that every Wednesday we have lunch, and you have to go to a new restaurant. And you rotate the hosting, or you rotate the person who's responsible for choosing the new restaurant. And we have been eating lunch together, unless Wednesday falls on a Christmas day or Easter, for 51 years.
Oh, gee.
And the advantage of that is, to me at least, because they talk mostly about legal issues, and you can bring out any issue you want to, but generally speaking, they're passing information among themselves, and among other things, plus the quality of the food. And there's always criticism as to whether the guy made a good selection or not. But to me, the greatest advantage of the Wednesday Luncheon Group, aside from the camaraderie, is that you get to eat at every new restaurant that opens in Honolulu, and there are over 4,000. And if one goes out of business, the new owner qualifies as a new restaurant. Is that you get to eat lunch to determine the quality of the food, the price, and everything else, so that, you know, if you have a lousy lunch, it's unlikely you're going to have a great dinner. And there's nothing worse than spending a lot of money at a restaurant and a lot of time for a lousy dinner.
Okay. So, Jay, you know, how did you sort of gave us a hint as to how it came about that you decided to change from the practice of law, but you've really made a change. You've retired completely from your firm and gone into doing something altogether different. You know, why did you decide at this point in time in your career to try to take on something new, to give up the security of the law firm and the people that you were used to working with? Why did you decide to do that, and How did this ThinkTech come about?
That's an interesting question. Mind you, it had existed for a long time before I retired, and I retired at the beginning of 2013. And I had been of counsel for a year before that. Well, it was gradual. I mean, it was this was taking more time, and that was taking less time, and gradually I found myself more and more involved in this ThinkTech. And I found that it was gratifying to me. And although it wasn't paying any money, I've never taken any salary out of it. It gave me a lot of gratification, so I wanted to continue to do it. I was also writing for the newspaper, which I still am. And so that whole journalism thing, you know, once it bites you, you're stuck.
You're stuck.
And I think I got stuck in it at some point. And it only seemed natural because I was putting more time into this and less time into the practice. And at a certain point, and Ed can tell you, at a certain point, retirement seems a good option. You know, your life has changed to a certain extent. In my case, I was really happy that I had somewhere that attracted me more. And so I could make a sort of a graceful change, graceful exit.
So are you happy with how ThinkTech has developed and the state that it's in right now? Do you feel that you've accomplished what you set out to do? And what's your vision for the future for ThinkTech?
How much time have you got?
3 minutes, max.
I don't want to take this out of Ed's side here.
No, and you're not going to.
Okay, fair. Well, yes, it's successful as far as I'm concerned. If you look around, you see a really high-tech studio with great equipment, great systems, great people. This is working well. We have 20 or 25 shows, depending, every single week. We also do luncheon programs. We distribute live, like now. We distribute to Olelo, we distribute to OC16, and of course to YouTube, where we have virtually thousands of these talk shows, so it's gratifying. And we have the Bar Association. We work with the Bar Association of this series, so we're just as happy as we can be. We want to do more of that next year. We want to have more of these shows. We want to cover more areas. We want to go to the neighbor islands and do on location. And so it's a natural progression in that regard.
Well, that'll be quite exciting, I think, if you can go to the neighbor islands. It always seemed when I was president of the bar that anytime we could actually get out there to the neighbor islands to do some activities, that it was greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
So Ed, in your case, you just retired, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so why did you decide to retire, and how are you enjoying retirement here in Hawaii?
Well, I'm enjoying it a lot. My wife and I have always been travelers, but this sort of frees you up to go when you want to go, and there's not a trial interfering that you scheduled 6 months before, that kind of thing. So I'm adjusting to it. I mean, it is quite a change from going to the office every day. And I think that on balance, I recommend it.
So are people in your firm still calling you with questions and concerns, or are they paddling their own canoe?
Well, once in a while, as a matter of fact, just today, my partner Bill Bordner called me in a case that I had been handling for Queens, and then he took it over. And he was asking me about certain aspects of discovery and so on that I conducted. And so, every once in a while I have to get involved that way.
So where's your most exciting trip coming up?
Well, the most exciting one I've been on so far was to Antarctica.
Wow.
Just about a year ago, which is their summer, our winter. And I just found that one of the most exciting things I've ever done. In my Navy days, I sailed the 7 seas for 4 years, but this was really an exciting thing. We'd go aboard little Zodiacs twice a day and land at various places, hike over the ice and mingle with the penguins. It was just, so I'd like to repeat something like that again.
Yeah.
But, could I mention one thing getting back to Guantanamo,
Yes, of course.
that I think is quite important, and that is that this bulk of people, I've seen the statistics, I don't remember exactly what they are, but of the people who were imprisoned back in 2002, the majority of them have never been charged with any kind of criminal offense. That's one of the things that attracted me, that by then we had these folks locked away for 5 years or so, and now it's a lot longer than that. Without charging them, without having a trial that they can go to. So the closest we've come to it is the habeas corpus. And the judge that we had, named Robertson, who I was very impressed with as a judge, decided the case when we finished the evidence and basically found that my client had not committed any acts that were adverse to the United States. Nothing adverse to the United States. But he found an association between my client and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban based on this factor, that during the time that he was getting his leg walked on, he was in and out of hospitals all the time, and in between he would stay in guest houses in Kabul. The guest houses, I understand, it sort of takes over what a hotel would do in our case. And he bought into the government argument that these particular guest houses where my client would stay between hospitalizations was really owned or controlled by either the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. And because of that association, he thought it was appropriate to continue the confinement of my client. So if you want to talk about guilt by association, there it is.
What do you think that would stand up under the military code of justice if this was a court-martial case?
I certainly don't. I don't think it would stand up under, we lost, so I guess it did stand up for a moment, but logically speaking, that should not be a sufficient, everything put together should not have resulted in his continued confinement.
And Ed, with your experience with Guantanamo, what do you think is the primary reason why they haven't shut it down, since there have been no charges filed, and according to different sources, the information that they've gotten from all of the detainees there is, you can put in a thimble, that insofar as usefulness is concerned.
I think that's true with this first group, the 02 group, which is the majority.
Yeah.
Were nobody's.
But then the second group, which Mohammed Kali was in, not only did he confess to being the mastermind behind the World Trade Center bombing, but he also confessed to the killing of Daniel Pearl, which upset what happened in Pakistan, because in Pakistan they had prosecuted somebody for beheading Daniel Pearl, and so this was right after the verdict came in. So by his confessing to being the mastermind behind the beheading of Daniel Pearl, he kind of upset the apple cart. So he was certainly one questions even, I think, the second group that was brought in.
But these high value people have tainted the whole place.
Yeah.
I'm not in any position to say good, bad, or indifferent as to them. As a matter of fact, just to give you an example as to how that was conducted, before I stopped going to Guantanamo, the prisoners were confined in prison number 5 and number 6, but there was also a number 7,
yeah.
and that's where these real bad guys were. And if you ask me, well, where was prison number 7? I don't know. That was a top military secret of the place. Is where they kept these guys, or keeping them to this very day.
Well,
so, anyway, I think if you really look at the facts as far as the mass of these guys, there was no reason to lock them away.
Well, I
what's
want to thank all of
extraordinary
you.
is Ed has gone out of his normal practice. He's changed his life, enriched his life. It serves as a symbol, as a lesson to all of us that there's more than just practice, and you can have another chapter, right, Phil?
Well, I want to
I
thank
know that a
all
long
of you.
time ago.
Well, I really want to thank all of you for your fine contribution today, and it's really been an honor to be able to chair this panel. I've admired all three of you very much, and I think this show's been a great show. So I want to thank the audience and everyone for joining us at the ThinkTech Hawaii studios, and for a fascinating show with some of the most distinguished attorneys in Honolulu, Phil Ching, Fidell, and Ed Burke. Aloha.
Thank you, Sherry.
And thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.